Perspective drawing can be very challenging, especially if you want to draw your urban scenes fast and still maintain the good proportions. In this video, you'll find out how to better structure your drawing process in order to draw your freehand two-point perspective scenes faster, easier, and with better proportions. An important part to better structure your drawing process is to take one step back and analyze your subject, especially the proportions. So, instead of jumping directly into drawing this building in two-point perspective, this time we'll start by sketching a small facade. You can associate this small sketch with taking notes or simply gathering information. And all the steps that we are doing now by sketching the facade first, we will apply them in a few moments when drawing in perspective. So, looking at the reference, I think the easiest way to start is by fitting it into a square and then further divide it into smaller parts. So, we start with a square, then we can divide this square into 3 vertical parts, the center part being a bit wider. That's where the archway will be. Then, we can also divide it horizontally. Now, let's try and analyze where the half circle of this archway is placed on the facade. We can see that it's placed in the higher half, actually in the lower part of the higher half. So we'll sketch it there. And these are the proportions in big scale. Now we can go one step closer and observe a few details, like the columns placed on the edges of the 2 lateral parts of the facade, all the decorations between the levels, friezes, cornices, and so on. When we suggest the columns, we are also defining the smaller areas where we'll place the windows, the balconies, and the smaller archways. A thing to notice is that the facade has 2 depth planes. The lateral sides are a bit more in front. They stick out a bit, and we can suggest this with thicker lines. We can also suggest the smaller archways at the ground level, and also raise the building's total height by adding the roof, suggesting the windows, and also the base. If we look closely, we can notice that the building has a base that contributes to the monumental feeling. So, as you see, even though we started with a simple square, we slowly build up the facade. And if you practice this method enough times, you'll be able to do all these steps in your mind concomitantly with drawing directly in perspective. Now, let's use all this gained information and apply the same steps in our two-point perspective drawing. So, this time we'll start by placing the horizon line. Then we'll continue with the main vertical. This line represents the corner of the building that is closest to us. Then, from the top and bottom of this vertical edge, we can draw lines that converge to the 2 vanishing points. Now, this is where the small facade sketch starts to simplify our process. As you see, I'm a bit unsure of where the lower point of the main vertical exactly is. And in order to find it, I can start by suggesting the horizon line on the small facade sketch and look at the ratio between the part of the building above the horizon line and the part of the building below the horizon line. What we can notice is that we have a low horizon line, and the ratio is, by approximation, I think around 5.5 to 1. So the part above the horizon line is around 5 times higher than the part below. I think it's much easier to appreciate this ratio on the facade than directly in perspective. And from here, we can take this information and apply it to our perspective. Can you see how having sketched the small facade in advance really helps in simplifying our drawing in perspective process? Let me know in a comment below. So now that we have the main vertical and its relation with the horizon line defined, we can continue with drawing the simple box in perspective. This box represents the initial rectangle that we've used to sketch the facade. But because it's perspective, we can also suggest its depth. Looking at the depth, it's not the full cube, but more around a third of a cube. This is just by approximating. We can also suggest the back sides of the building, and we build them by drawing converging lines, and where they intersect, we will have the other verticals. From this point, we can continue with dividing the main facade in perspective as we did with the little sketch. So we can start by drawing the diagonals and find the center. Then we can divide the facade into 3 parts, the center one being a bit wider, exactly as we did in the first part of the video. Then we can draw the arch, the half circle, in the lower half of the higher half of the facade, and so on. Now you can see how all these steps connect and that we follow a structure that makes the drawing process easier. Let me know in a comment below, what do you think about this method of drawing urban scenes? Is it easier for you? Does it make sense? I'm very curious to know. So I mentioned this before, but it's really helpful to use diagonals in order to find the center of a particular surface, because once you have the center, you can continue to suggest smaller parts by approximation. Now we can continue with suggesting the smaller arches on the lateral parts of the building, the columns on the facade, the windows, the balconies, basically building up a few more details by following the same steps from the initial sketch. So I also extended a few lines from the vanishing point on the right to suggest the street, and I also started suggesting some of the figures. As you see, I'm first placing their heads around the height of the horizon line, and then I continue with suggesting the rest of their body. If they are closer to us, they will be bigger shapes, but their eye level will continue to stay around the height of the horizon line. So, I hope this approach to drawing in two-point perspective helped you, at least a bit, in figuring out how to better structure your drawing process in order to draw your favorite urban scenes faster, easier, and with good proportions. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to let me know in a comment below and check out my other videos with drawing tips available on the channel. Take care!